Israel nation.
Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Monday, September 22nd. We're going to be getting into some of the headlines for today. We're obviously going to go over some of the speeches that were given yesterday at Charlie Kirk's Memorial in Phoenix, Arizona. They keep saying Glendale. I lived in Glendale for a while. It's part of Phoenix. Glendale. But the arena there, the State Farm Arena there that holds 73,000 people, something like that. And plus the overflow arena next door holds about 14,000. So altogether seated is about 90,000, maybe. Apparently outside there were other tens of thousands. So you could say safely it was over 100,000 people. The Turning Point was quoted as saying there were 200,000 people there. But everyone was there from the Trump administration cabinet, including the most rounding speech I found was from Stephen Miller. And I'm going to go into why I believe that is. And there were also very good speeches by a number of other people. Some breaking news there from the event, the memorial there yesterday, was that Elon Musk showed up by himself. He sat by himself and then was invited down to Trump's box where the two shook hands. So that's some breaking news. You're going to have to excuse my the lack of schedule recently. Like I've said, I've been consumed with other things going on, and I just haven't been able to do the daily podcast as I usually do, 10 a.m. Every morning, Monday through Friday on Rumble. But it's been very sporadic lately. I don't know if you could tell, but I'm worn down to the nub here, and I'm just exhausted. From all things. I got a lot of traveling to do and a lot of things to take care of, a lot of stress involved in all that. So you must be understanding. So this week I will be back, I think Wednesday, Thursday, and probably won't have an episode on Friday, maybe a special report over the weekend. I hope to be back on a regular schedule by Tuesday of next week, and as soon as we get into October, because there's some time-sensitive stuff I have to get through, but enough about me. Let's get back to the news. So, I'm going to go over the memorial a little bit. I'm not going to play any clips or anything from some of the speeches, but we're certainly going to talk about it. One of the breaking, not unusual, but something breaking, Erica Kirk, Charlie Kirk's wife, says she forgives the killer, which, of course, forgiveness in Christianity is a big tenet. So I'm not saying that was expected. I don't know if I could ever, but I would like to say it. I would try. So why don't we just get to the headlines for today, Monday, September 22nd. Like I said before, we have some other news besides the memorial, but news regarding Ballistics testimony. I'm not going to quote who gave it. If you were watching, either Alex Jones or other people online, content creators, there was some testimony by someone involved in Turning Point USA who spoke to the surgeon that treated Charlie Kirk immediately after. And so we're going to get some definitive testimony, or at least speculative testimony, about exactly what happened. That's going to dispel some things there. So let's get into the headlines. First up is from Reuters. At Charlie Kirk Memorial, Trump rallies MAGA against political opponents. Also, Don Jr. spoke both senior and junior made their speeches overtly political, which I thought, given the venue, and of course you got to read the room, wasn't received that well. Although Charlie Kirk was very political, he was a MAGA, America First. This memorial wasn't suited that well. I think most of the successful speeches, the well-received speeches, dealt with Christianity, Charlie Kirk's history, Turning Point USA, a lot of the testimony regarding his life, and of course, Christian tenets and all these things. Those were received very, very well. Even RFK Jr.'s loose references to biblical scripture, etc. So one of the speakers there was Vice President J.D. Vance, who recently hosted Charlie Kirk's podcast. This is One American News. Vance, Charlie Kirk is a hero to the U.S. and a martyr for the Christian faith. Now, this was a reoccurring theme during the memorial, which was martyrdom. I'm a firm believer in historical loops and things that reoccur. The Messiah and other things. The biblical record for some of those extreme thumpers, the biblical record stops, with Christ's death. I don't think it does. I think the biblical story, or the same thread of good and evil, the fight against good and evil, faith in God, all these things, goes on throughout history. And if you've ever bared witness to miracles and other metaphysical manifestations, you would understand. So what happened to Charlie Kirk is not something that is new to history, certainly. So he certainly is a martyr because he was a soldier for the cause, Christian or conservative or otherwise. And that's the problem with assassination. And many people know this, and even people that are in the intelligence services and the dark recesses of state power, that they might have considered assassinating Trump before, but there's always that worry about making someone a martyr, which means, as they did with Christ, you kill them and they're bigger than they were in life. And that might be the case with Charlie Kirk. But martyrdom was brought up quite a few times, and the first time it was brought up, there was a little gas, not a gasp, but a little, expression from the crowd, like, yeah, he went there. But once that ice was broken, it was more readily received. Also, from One American News, Erica Kirk to husband's killer, I forgive you. Like I said before, I don't know if I could do that. It's not surprising, but again, you're on the world stage. You got to walk the walk, right? So she went on to say that that's what Charlie would have done, or would have wanted me to do, or alluding to that tenet of the Christian faith is forgiveness. And of course it is. I don't know if I could be so forgiving. It's not like somebody steals from you that has want. These are deluded people, obviously evil people. And that was also a theme throughout the day, was evil. And when the first person broke the ice in one of their speeches, was it Tucker Carlson? I forget exactly who broke the ice. I think it was earlier than him. That there was also that gasp, like, oh, he went there, but then after it was more well received. It truly is evil. Obviously, if you want to kill someone from a cowardly perch, snipe somebody, that's, you know, the thing is, if it's from a state organ, it's almost understandable because you're devoid of that kind of hatred. But if you're really coming from an emotional response of one individual person or a small group of non-governmental people, non-professional assassins, that's where the problem lies. That's a cheap shot. You didn't want to fight Charlie Kirk, or you didn't want to, try to confront him even violently, where you could be accosted. You did it from a place where you could escape, or hopefully escape, and take out a peaceful Christian. Charlie Kirk never threatened violence. He didn't do anything. We're going to get into some of the things that people purport him of saying that he doesn't really say, and they make all these accusations. It's the same thing over and over again. It's the smear, and people are in the wrong because they're the ones doing the smearing without any evidence. So if somebody says somebody does this or that or said this or that, it's like, well, in this age of media, we can obviously get the videotape, so to speak. But they never provide the videotape. They never say, I was sick and tired of Charlie Kirk's hateful rhetoric, and then they play a clip. They can't do that and that's the way to do it, figuratively bringing the receipts, but they never do that with Charlie. So even the black pastors and people from the black community, Jasmine Crockett for one, and we're going to get to her in just a second, that said he did all these well, show us the clips. If they're really that numerous and that hateful, it shouldn't be hard to find. But again, these people are going by hearsay. They don't actually watch. It's the same thing with Donald Trump. The people that say Donald Trump said this or is this or whatever, they never actually watch a speech from Donald Trump. So how do you know? All right, let's see if we can't. I got to fix my feed here. Bear with me. Let's see if it'll come back. Getting back to the headlines, though. From the New York Post, Charlie Kirk funeral. Trump praises great American hero. Widow Erica fearlessly forgives killer at massive memorial. Massive, true. Like I said, over 100,000 people safely. You could say conservatively. Turning Point said 200,000 people. I think the regular media and maybe the police department said 90,000. I think that was really from regular media, because if you add up the capacity seating at State Farm, it's 73 something thousand. And then over at the other arena, the hockey arena, it was 14,000. So, you're getting close to 90,000, but that's not including the overflow. There were people staying in the parking lot, tens of thousands. So one of the other speakers was Jack Posobiec, former naval intelligence officer and right-wing influencer from the post-millennial. Put on the full armor of God and fight. Do it now. For Charlie, are you ready to fight back, he says, and are you ready to put on the full armor of God and face the evil in high places in spiritual warfare before us? He's paraphrasing from the Bible. Put on an iron shirt and chase the devil out of earth, so to speak. So I liked his speech. I like that reference, obviously. And putting on the full armor of God just refers to righteousness. Assuming that it's true, if you act in righteous manner, God's got your back. That goes without saying. I could say from my life, if you give God the glory, by God's grace go I, and know that if you have that relationship with the Creator, he won't line your path with gold, perhaps, but I saw it in my life that you will be able to sidestep misfortune. And I'm a firm believer also in the saying, as God helps those who help themselves. So you have to get off your ass and do something. And if you do, especially in the righteous cause, you will be rewarded. And that doesn't include killing, killing for good, doing something horrible for good. That doesn't make any sense. And also, VDH, Victor David Hansen, is quoted in Real Clear Politics. Charlie Kirk's fight to liberate a generation from university indoctrination. I'm not going to go into the text here, but you can only imagine. But the premise is correct. So leftism, as I said previously, leftism, socialism is a conspiracy that was devised by the merchant class who deposed the monarchies and the church to take ultimate power over the globe and continue to shore up their power over time. So they didn't want another revolution deposing the merchant class. And so they devised a gimme. So socialism is the state is going to give you all sorts of stuff so you won't be an enemy of the state. But like I said previously, it's just to reduce everybody to a poor serf for all intents and purpose, so you don't have the wherewithal to fight back. So that's what's good about capitalism, is there's a ladder up for those who choose to pursue it, to choose to climb it. But what the elite class want to do is pull up that ladder. And that's what basically socialism does. For the extremely poverty-stricken, they're like, yay, it's going to lift up my living standard a monicum. But everybody else who's middle and upper middle class will be brought down. So, and then of course we got to talk about jobs. Over the weekend on Face the Nation, other news programs, they were talking about the economy. They had Gary Cohn on, former economic advisor to Trump during the first administration, dancing around the question of AI. They didn't even mention it, by him saying that corporations are shrinking their workforce, but they're not saying the productivity is going up. So how does that happen? It happens because they're shrinking their workforce and replacing entry-level jobs and some of the other jobs with AI. So that's the conundrum, one of the conundrums we're going to talk about. After this, I'm going to get into some of the other stuff in just a minute, but I want to continue with the memorial. PJ Media is reporting Stephen Miller's powerful tribute to Charlie Kirk. The day Charlie died, the angels wept. My point being is that this line that was repeated during Stephen Miller's address, he goes on to say, our enemies cannot comprehend our strength, our resolve, our determination. They cannot imagine what they have awakened. And he talks about awakened a dragon. I would never use that terminology because the dragon is reference to the devil. It's not, you can't use dragon in terms, or it's the mythical opposition. You can even relate it to perhaps the Leviathan. However, the dragon is a reference to the devil. Okay, so you'd never use it in some sort of righteous sense. We're fighting the dragon. We're not we're not the dragon. So, but the point is, the important point of his text is, he went on to say, you have nothing, you are nothing, you are wickedness. We are the ones who lifted up humanity. And he went back to this refrain over and over again, that the enemies of righteousness are nothing, you are nothing, which is true, They are, and that's why they're frustrated. The people that associate with the left, for the most part, aren't individuals with strong ethic and productivity. They're the ones that sit on their couches all day and go, how come society isn't delivering for me? And so they get mad. But he went on to say that we're the ones that build things, et cetera, et cetera. You're the ones that tear things down, you because you have nothing. And most of all, and then he evoked things like jealousy regarding this. But he kept saying, referring to the people that were responsible for Charlie Kirk's killing, of having nothing, and they are nothing. More from this was a post on X. Stephen Miller just went off. We are the ones who build, who create, who lift up humanity. You thought you could kill Charlie Kirk? You have made him immortal. They cannot imagine what they have awakened. They cannot conceive of the army they have arisen in all. And then he went on to say, you have no idea the dragon you have awakened. I don't agree with that. Our children's children's children will be strong. We will defend goodness. We will defend the light. You cannot terrify us, because it is terrorism, as was the attack on the United Healthcare CEO. It's really anti-capitalist terrorism, but I'm not going to digress. He went on to say to my friend Charlie, to my brother Charlie, I promise you, my brother, we will prove worthy of your sacrifice. We will make you proud. We will finish the job. We will achieve victory for our children, for our families, for our civilization, and for every patriot that stands with us, etc., etc. All right, so let's get to the crux of the matter. All memorializing aside, for Charlie Kirk and his family, obviously my prayers go out to those folks. Terrible loss. And like I said, I wasn't a fan of Charlie's, but I liked Charlie Kirk and I respected him. And I liked what he was doing in the Turning Point thing. It was worthy of lauding for sure. But I don't like to moralize. I don't like to be moralized. But I did appreciate his intellect, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go on to the naysayers. NBC News, no evidence found yet, of course, of ties between Charlie Kirk's shooting and left-wing groups, officials say. 3 people familiar with a federal probe, so anonymous sources from NBC News. The federal probe into Kirk's assassination told NBC News that the investigators have yet to find a link between the alleged shooter and left-wing groups. So this is my problem here. Is the amorphous blob of socialists is in itself a conspiracy? So especially when you're radicalized, what it is progressive radicals, radicalized to the point of extremism, which means violence. They don't do this in a vacuum. If you think that this guy got his grandpa's rifle, took it upon himself to get up on a roof and shoot Charlie Kirk, he might have been motivated to do so. But if somehow you think, as I said always with these young people that get violent, especially with firearms, is that they're online being either goaded, tempted, or otherwise manipulated or influenced to commit the act of violence. It's all of them, going all the way back to Columbine. You didn't have this sort of violence perpetrated over and over and over again until the internet came into being. So the internet provides chat rooms, which provide anonymous ways for people to influence other mentally ill and unstable people to do things. So they are all connected without a doubt. And we're going to get into some of these other headlines. I'm not going to get, and I have some text here from NBC News I'm not going to really get into. Every indication so far is that this was one guy who did one really bad thing because he found Kirk's ideology personally offensive. Yeah, but that doesn't mean you act violently, right? He might have found Charlie Kirk's ideology personally offensive. That means you can act out violently? No, you just go, yeah, I don't like that what that guy espouses. And then go for a hike or go play soccer or play with your kids or whatever. Do whatever you do. Go dress up as a furry. But there is a conspiracy. So the point being is, let's start with this guy. Okay, One American News, 71-year-old man arrested for false confession of Charlie Kirk's murder, also facing child pornography charges. George Zinn, 71, was taken into custody on Monday, and now he faces a second-degree felony charge of obstructing justice connection with Kirk's death at Utah Valley University. Zinn will be held without bail, according to online court documents. But so the campus police said that immediately after Kirk's assassination, Zinn began screaming, I shot him, now shoot me. Right there. I shot him, now shoot me. This guy's part of a conspiracy. Now, it was apparent that people had foreknowledge of the attempt, then gloated following it, saying, see, I told you so. So there was foreknowledge. This guy probably had foreknowledge. He is a known antagonizer, disruptor of Republican events for most of his life, most of his 71 years. So he was there as an agent. He didn't try to disrupt Charlie. He wasn't holding a sign protesting Charlie. He's 71 years old, so he wasn't a student on campus, but he was there. And then immediately after the assassination took place, he sought to cause disruption to the law enforcement's pursuit of the actual killer. That's a conspiracy. Did he know this other guy? Was he on the Discord chat? We don't know. So that's things that the FBI needs to prove. Apparently, the FBI is not doing its job because, as I said, the ballistics report came from the doctor who examined Charlie Kirk immediately after the murder. And then that information was related to a Turning Point official who was there, I believe was there during the examination. So it was a 30-06 round. As I told most people that aren't familiar with ballistics, they came up with all these crazy theories and that had to be an exit wound. No, it didn't. That wound where the blood came from was directly in line where the shooter was. So you can have all the theories you want, but just to make up theories to dispel the emerging narrative isn't the way it works. There has to be problems with the emerging narrative for you to go, hold on, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. So, and then there were like exit wound, entry wound, where's the exit wound, first of all, there's not always an exit wound. And apparently that this is the case, that the bullet hit his spine and you can actually see his body a jerk. And that is an that is not an indication of him being hit by the round. That is an indication of the round hitting bone. So if you've ever seen somebody shot before, if the bullet stops inside you, it causes a concussion. If the bullet goes right through you, you might recoil at a little bit at the entry wound, But depending on the velocity of the round, sometimes that doesn't even happen because round going through flesh is like a hot knife through butter sort of deal. But it's when it hit a bone, you get that kind of, and you saw him jerk. And then my thing is, how often does a victim of a shooting fall towards the direction of the shooter? It happens sometimes. It all depends on what the round does inside the body, what have you. So it turns out that the shooting that's an entry wound where the blood came from, and he collapsed in that direction. That matches the trajectory from where the shooter was on the roof. So there's no crazy conspiracy theory, no flashes in stairwells. Like I said, the acoustics, and we learned this during Las Vegas. It's all about acoustics. So sure, there's echo and stuff like that, but the acoustics are going to determine what happens or where the investigation goes. And plus, if you have visual evidence and then ballistics, et cetera, et cetera. So all these crazy things are sort of dispelled. He was hit by one 30-06 round from approximately 150 yards, hit his spine, apparently went down and damaged his heart. And that's why you had the huge amount of blood. Apparently, it did not hit his artery. What the blood was coming from the heart wound through the body cavity, I guess. I'm not a medical person. I know a little bit about ballistics, so and when the round, especially when the round hits bone, lead is softer than bone. So although it'll shatter bone, the round expands at that point. And that's what we're going to get into here. New York Post, FBI probes troubling lingering questions about Charlie Kirk assassination were popularized by online sleuths, which I have nothing against crowdsourcing. I think it's a great way to investigate things, but you start getting this Q mindset of everything's a conspiracy and trap doors and people popping up through trap doors and shooting. If somebody shot Charlie Kirk from close range, first of all, if it was a pistol or anything else, it would make a different it would have a different acoustic profile, and there'd be evidence. People are like, well, why aren't they releasing the camera footage? Well, that's Turning Point camera footage, and they're not interested in releasing it. It's their property, so it was probably released to investigators, but not to the general public. But here's where the conspiracy comes into play. Some of the theories surrounding odd signals made by people near Kirk shortly before he was fatally shot in the neck, such as hand motions and baseball cap tips. Now, I said this during the Trump assassination thing also. So you have people, when you have an assassination attempt, you have assets close to the victim who won't react in a fearful way because they know they're not a target. And after the shooting, they will give a signal to let you know successful or not successful. Sometimes, so the sniper will take a second shot. Usually, if they want to escape, they won't take a second shot because that'll give up their position. So it's one and done as far as snipers are concerned. So, but there would be some signals because I believe there was a conspiracy involving the people asking the original questions because they wanted to link those topics specifically to the murder for whatever reason they did. And so and the killer couldn't hear the questions being so far away, so he needed to be signaled when the questions were asked and about to be answered, et cetera, et cetera. So I believe in this theory. I believe that in the Trump theory, that there were people in the audience that were signaling other folks, whether it was successful or unsuccessful. And in this case, I believe the shooter was signaled to when the question had been asked and when it was time to fire. Hand motions and baseball cap tips. If you've seen the footage, you understand. Now, could it just be like I'm tipping my cap because I'm hot or whatever? Yeah, maybe. But hand motions or signals, the waving of stuff, that's harder to dispel. Also stuff like a plane that allegedly turned off its transponder after departing from an airport near the assassination site. Now, this goes all the way back to 9/11, and I'm a proponent of this theory, is that there's certain white jets, small otherwise, but jets big enough as a small airliner without any markings during 9/11 that circled the attack sites. There was no transponder. They couldn't find a transponder or a flight path linked to these strange white jets. And sometimes you see them often, little cause for paranoia there. And there was one seen here also. So whether people knew about this attempt, which it was discussed online, so anything discussed online could be known by intelligence services, and the intelligence services don't have to be tied to a state, they can be tied to a corporation or a conglomeration of corporations. You don't know. So there is this white plane theory that crops up again. Also, how the weapon was transported, hand gestures observed as potential signals near Charlie at the time of the assassination, and visitors to the alleged shooter's residence in the hours and days leading up to September 10th. Now, that was the most important one, was the days before the assassination, cars with out-of-state plates were driving up. The witnesses said, way more visitors than normal to this apartment, and the people that were visiting gave off a bad vibe, whatever that means. This is the biggest clue evidence towards a conspiracy. There are obviously people, if it's not state related, which I doubt it is, people are saying Israel, yeah, maybe, maybe some influence. Maybe they were just watching. Was there a backup shooter somewhere, that was going to piggyback if the assassination, the shot from this guy didn't work? Because you could hear it was only one round. And to fire simultaneously to cover the acoustic is almost impossible to do. The acoustic profile. So this is the conspiracy. The online chat, which somehow wasn't picked up by FBI or NSA or any intelligence services. Then the visitations of people from out of state, what makes it a conspiracy. It's not, they weren't coming over from across town. They were coming from out of state, and people that looked menacing, that obviously had serious business, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the conspiracy, was the visitors, the online chat. It was probably, and if you know anything about the larger conspiracy is socialism, but the smaller conspiracy is the militancy of transgenderism. It's a transgender cult that is becoming more and more militant. You saw it with the Zizians, etc. So, going to the unfounded conspiracy, just the news, how a conspiracy theory about Charlie Kirk's killer being MAGA spread online to Kimmel and beyond. Robinson's family members said he leaned to the left politically and that he had become more pro-gay and trans rights oriented. Obviously, sorry about that. Obviously, the rifle casings belonging to, obviously because he was living with a transgender furry, that they became romantically involved. The killer became romantically involved with. So, leads you to believe that that's when his radicalization started. So the rifle casings belonging to suspected Kirk assassin Tyler Robinson were, according to law enforcement, engraved with anti-fascist, anti-Nazi phrases, as well as apparent sexualized online memes and video game references. These people are deluded. They spend too much time online, and their online fantasy blends into reality. It becomes really weird. But first of all, anti-Nazi phrases, okay? There aren't any Nazis. Right? The Nazi party, where the Nationalist Socialist Party of Deutschland, of Germany, which was a more nationalist type of socialism. So, which just meant it was further center. Certain industries in Germany during the Nazis were nationalized. Others were kept separate. The Nazis really Hitler didn't touch the corporate structure, which basically makes it fascist. But the fascist pillars were obviously corporations, military, the church, which people don't really talk about anymore. So what we have in the United States now is more corporate fascism, but their reference to fascism and Nazis is there are no Nazis in America. There are no National Socialists. Sorry. They're people that like Nazis or that like Hitler or think they're Nazis because they're white supremacists. Few and far between, and mostly uneducated knuckleheads, because they're afraid of black people or something. But mainstream conservatives are not Nazis. They're not white supremacists. So you had Biden promulgating this kind of theory and then using the FBI, saying that, yeah, that's true. It's white supremacy. It's Christian nationalism. Is like, although that might be a thing, it's unlikely, right? Because Christian churches have very low attendance. Maybe more now, but we'll see. Another left-wing accounts claimed that the suspected shooter donated to Trump, but campaign expert Rob Pyers tweeted that FEC contribution records show that Tyler Robinson of St. George, Utah, where the suspect was walked into police as a donor of the Trump MAGA committee, but it's from an entirely different 34-year-old Tyler Robinson. So the 22-year-old shooter there is not the 34-year-old Tyler Robinson that, so they try to connect them any way they can because they're losing. And they do this time and time again, like Trump's assassination was actually a MAGA supporter. It just doesn't even make sense. It's dumb. But they have to do it because the onslaught of media pushing narratives is how leftists absolve themselves. But we don't really know the motive of the shooter. Fox News, Disney says Jimmy Kimmel's show will be preempted indefinitely following Charlie Kirk assassination comments. I don't think I have the comment. No, I didn't put the comments in. If you don't remember what he said, the right wing is going to do anything to try to tell people that the killer was anything but a MAGA supporter, which he wasn't. Just because you come from a conservative family doesn't mean, or vice versa, just because you come from a liberal family doesn't mean you're liberal. Because there are two ways children behave when they're raised. They either rebel or they accept. They accept the tutelage of their parents or they rebel against it. This guy obviously rebelled against it, but specifically he was radicalized after becoming romantically involved with his transgender roommate. Then he got online on John. And if you get on these chat rooms in Discord or 4chan or 8chan or whatever, you see that people talk about the craziest shit because that's where you can talk about it. But the problem is you're not talking face to face and you're not texting friends. You're on there talking to a stranger. You don't know who the fuck you're talking to. Could be some ex-FBI agent. And also, New York Post, Bill Maher says Jimmy Kimmel was wrong to suggest Charlie Kirk's killer was supported by MAGA. And then, of course, he blasts his ex-network over suspension of Kimmel. all those late night guys were failing. And they weren't funny. I used to like the Colbert Report, you know, where he would mock a conservative commentator. He was really mocking Bill O'Reilly, who's not even on the air anymore because he didn't have any support. But Jimmy Kimmel is an idiot. They're all idiots. The people on the left are just dumb. So it's okay if you have certain ideological beliefs or political beliefs. I don't have a problem with that. You want the government to spend more. Okay, I understand that. But if you say you want less laws, less authoritarianism, that's actually libertarian. That's not liberal. Liberal means you want the government to spend more money. You want bigger government. Opposed to conservatism, which you want small government. So I don't care if you have a liberal belief, but to sort of go out there and kind of lie or delude yourself or delude others into believing that something that isn't. And the networks, the FCC rules denote about lie. They have willfully lying on the air isn't allowed. You could do that online if you want, or even on cable, but you can't do it on the networks. So Fox News is reporting to Jasmine Crockett, Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas, slams white lawmakers who voted to honor Charlie Kirk. Texas Democrat cites personal criticism from Charlie Kirk as a factor in opposing the House resolution. Okay. So there's a House resolution that actually passed that memorializes Charlie Kirk and denounces political killings. It's why people, this was a perfect time for Democrats to save themselves, to come out and go, well, though I don't agree with Charlie Kirk, what he was saying, he had the right to say it, so I do condemn the killing. It should have been unanimous. Have people like Jasmine Crockett go out there and keep spreading the lie that somehow Kirk was anti-black or racist because he just pointed out that the black community, the black population, not all blacks, some, obviously in black, and like I said, there's some economic issues about why people of color are living in poverty, and if you're in poverty, you're be more prone to crime, etc. It's more because of poverty than it is because you're black. If people want to say the crime is because you're black, that's wrong. But the truth is that the predominant race of most of the criminals is black. So because you say that doesn't make you racist, but I would always add the caveat that there's some underlying economic issues that need to be addressed. The crime isn't just because of your color. The crime is because you're impoverished, and why you're impoverished because you're a person of color. That needs to be addressed. But doesn't change the fact that the majority, especially if you take in the demographic content there, the majority of people that commit crimes per capita are black. So just because Charlie Kirk said that, which is a fact, that doesn't make him racist, because I haven't heard anything else that he said about black folks except they get too many abortions. Other than that, he didn't say anything about them except maybe they're preyed upon by the Democratic Party. She said, one of the things I want to do is point out that has not been laid out that honestly hurts my heart is when I saw no votes. There were only 2 Caucasians. For the most part, only people that voted no were people of color because of the rhetoric that Charlie Kirk continuously put out there was rhetoric that specifically targeted people of color. And that's just what I said, was his comments regarding people of color only applied to criminal statistics, abortion statistics, and of course, people that are prey, the black community is prey to the Democratic Party. which is really strange because it's actually the Republican Party that freed them from slavery in the South, etc. All right, you might have seen this. This is One American News. So a Texas State student expelled after acting out Charlie Kirk assassination on campus. So there was a rally for a vigil for Charlie Kirk, and then some anti-demonstrators came out, and this guy started he wasn't acting out Charlie Kirk assassination on campus. He was mocking it. Sure, he was acting it out, but in a mocking way. I spoke about this in the last episode, the moral degradation of people on the left, or just people in general, really across the spectrum. The secularizing of people that they don't know what's quote unquote off limits, in bad taste, ethically unsound comments to make, whether it's Jasmine Crockett or this guy. You just shouldn't do. It's like what your mother said. If you don't have something nice to say about somebody, don't say anything at all. But now in this culture of everybody wants to be a star on YouTube. Well, it used to be YouTube. Now it's just on the internet in general. You know what I mean? It's like, look at me, look at me. And young kids do stupid shit all the time. So you could blame it on the youth. But people need to, especially men, young men, need to learn how to hold themselves stoically in the face of adversarial conditions. So the best thing to do is to do nothing, to stand there. That's stoicism. Don't remember, if you feel compelled to act, once you act, you can't take it back. It's not a video game. You can't just start over. Once you act, you can't take it back. So think before you act, and don't be compelled to act by your emotions. Use your intellect. Not saying you can't act, just like it's only act right away or immediately. If you don't, things are going to get worse. But you could wait to say something to somebody. You're writing a letter before you hit send, an email, before you hit send. Think about it. If you send it tomorrow after you cool down emotionally, is there anything going to be lost? You could write it while you're emotional, but reread it before you send it the next day. Anyway, we have more breaking news. You might have heard about this. New York Post: crazed gunman shouted "Free Palestine" before opening fire and killing guests at Sky Meadow Country Club in Nashua, New Hampshire. There's no conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy. They're not all, they say the same shit. Didn't the guy in D.C. who shot the people that worked at the Israeli embassy, he shouted "Free Palestine" also? It's like, you don't even know. And I'm not condoning what's going on in Gaza right now. Believe you me. I mean, they're bombing the shit out of the place and they're killing civilians all over the place. I'm not for that. I'm not a fan of the Israeli state. Sorry. Particularly when they do shit like this, but I don't know why, October 7th was obviously contrived. Why it led to this? Was this a plan all along? You really need to pick apart the whole issue. And then for Face the Nation to interview the friggin' Islamic militant who's now the head of Syria that used to be part of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, but no, he's not anymore. It's just, you got to say it's friggin' crazy. But we live in the United States. So you want to do Free Palestine and shoot people? Do it somewhere else. Friggin' wedding guests in New Hampshire have nothing to do with Gaza. And even the people that worked at the Israeli embassy in D.C., if you looked at their background, they didn't have anything to do with Gaza either. You know what? Why don't you go to Gaza, contact Hamas, pick up an AK-47, and do your business? Like, if you believe in Ukraine, you could go fight for Ukraine. Go do it. But don't shoot up a wedding. And this one guy, the Caesar, the victim, Robert Stephen DeCaesar, 59, was killed. He didn't have anything to do with Gaza. Hunter Nadeau, 23, of course, another person, a young 20-something idiot, was charged with murder after arresting him on Saturday night following the deadly shooting at Sky Meadow Country Club, about 40 miles north of Boston. Fucking idiot. Everybody wants to be a hero. I'm going to shoot a CEO. I'm going to shoot a wedding guest. I'm going to shoot, I'm going to break into Governor Shapiro's, commit arson at Governor Shapiro's house. I mean, what? You don't have anything fucking better to do? You ever try fishing? It's actually kind of fun. Or play golf. I don't know. Needlepoint, crochet. All right, more leftism, National Review, unscientific nature rights, mysticism pushed at Harvard. They talk about reciprocal duties do waterways have towards us? But if rivers have rights, such as right to flow, the human harm would be incalculable. Wouldn't be able to build dams, etc. I believe in natural rights as far as humans are concerned, but nature doesn't have rights. Only humans have rights, and they're God-given, blah, 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 blah. But if you're a secularist, there are enshrined in the founding document of this country individual rights. Individualism is the opposite of socialism. You defer to the individual, you don't defer to the all. Or, in the case of mostly practiced socialism, it's the group. And that's why I have these losers running around talking about trans rights and black rights, and they're individual rights, also known as civil rights. They're your individual rights. The smallest minority is the individual. They're your rights, and they belong to black Americans or American residents. You don't even have to be a citizen, but people living in America who are black or trans or gay. You don't have gay rights. What are gay rights? There are no rights. The thing is, the constitutional rights have to be applied universally for everyone. And that's where we're getting to the Civil Rights Act and civil rights movement are actually individual rights. But they would contest that certain groups don't get individual rights. Maybe so. That should be addressed. I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but they're individual rights. They're not group rights. Gays don't get special rights, and blacks and trans, and they just get rights. My rights have been violated as a gay person or a trans person. Okay, perhaps. But it's the old adage, if you tattoo your face and you're worried that you're being discriminated against when you apply for a job, you know what I mean? It's like if you show up with friggin' face piercings and purple, green, and blue hair, and you're supposed to work in customer service, at a customer service desk. I wouldn't say it like at a phone bank. It doesn't really matter. But if you deal with the public personally, you might be off-putting to customers. That's a question for the courts. The Atlantic says the U.S. is quietly pausing some arms sales to Europe as far as the America First agenda. The Department of Defense is stockpiling weapons. Well, we need to. And they say is pausing some arms sales to Europe. Who the fuck cares? I don't want war with Russia. I don't like what Russia is doing. They're taking advantage of the peace process. What countries do. But they see the existential threat from the West. That's the whole, you'd have to go all the way back to BRICS, the formation of BRICS, to understand why Russia is doing what they do, and the fact of NATO's incursions, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a quagmire for sure, but it's hard to know what to do. I don't give a shit about Ukraine, I don't think they should be bombed, but that was the problem with cozying up to the West. You think Russia would do nothing? And then going back to Gaza briefly, The Guardian, Australia joins UK and Canada in formally recognizing Palestinian state. The move comes as Anthony Albanese, who's the premier prime minister of Australia, tries to secure a meeting with Donald Trump amid warnings that recognition could spark punitive measures from the U.S. Perhaps. Here's the deal, is people are rushing to recognize the Palestinian state before Israel annexes Gaza. And the reason is to keep the territorial integrity intact of the fledgling Palestinian state, which includes the West Bank and Gaza. But I'm telling you, Israel had this plan on the shelf for years. As soon as Gaza voted for Hamas, the militant Islamic wing, to represent them as a government in Gaza, they had played their hand. And it would never have stood with Israel. And not only that, but they kept attacking Israel with rockets and stuff like that. Conversely, in the West Bank, where Fatah was elected, the Palestinian Authority was represented by Fatah, which was not militant, which was a diplomatic solution, which believed in a diplomatic solution. And there was no military incursions in the West Bank. There have been some briefly, but they did have to put up with the construction of the wall, et cetera, et cetera. All right, next headline. Hold on one second. My camera died again. My batteries are dying. Hold on. Kamala Harris comeback tour sparks Democratic unease as 2028 dreams are poisoned by 2024 disaster. Kamala Harris sucks. I was looking for my brand new battery. The camera batteries are like $50 each, and I don't know where it is. So, and I use this camera for other stuff too. So, in any case, back to the story. Kamala Harris comeback tour sparks Democratic unease as 2028 dreams are poisoned by 2024 disaster. Kamala Harris sucks. She doesn't have a political future. The national exposure of Kamala Harris showed the nation that she's a moron, and I think she has a drinking problem, but she's a moron, and you can't have a moron running the most powerful country in the world. And if you live here, you wouldn't want her to be leading your nation state, for sure. All right, some more news before we finish up here. Zero Hedge. Netherlands, Hungary push to designate Antifa as terrorist organization. Political leaders in the Netherlands and Hungary are backing proposals to designate Antifa as a terrorist group after U.S. President Donald Trump suggested he would take such an action in the United States. So what is Antifa? They're anti-fascist, which makes them communist. Technically, they're not. They're anarchists that look at any form of government as fascist. And there may be some argument there. I'd be happy to debate people about corporate fascism. But they're basically brown shirts, which were fascists in the 30s. In the 1930s Germany, Hitler and the Nazis organized and funded youth groups who would go around terrorizing people in Germany. So the kids now, Antifa, or whatever, anarchists or whatever, the kids out in the street now in black bloc are modern brown shirts working for really the communists, the socialists, the leftists, the Democrats, the progressives, any political cause on the left. They're pushing back against government, but only fiercely when it's Republican. Like somehow Republicans are the fascists and come on. And then Fox News had Trump to designate Antifa a major terrorist organization. Announcement come days after President said he would 100% consider the designation. Are they a terrorist group? The thing is it's naming them a terrorist group unlocks certain law enforcement powers. So they did the same thing with the narco-terrorists, the narcotic traffickers south of the border. Whatever, if it works, I don't care if Antifa is. I mean, Jerry Nadler said Antifa was a myth. I don't know about that. These are loosely connected groups because you have to go back to the Occupy movement. So we learned some, and so did the left, learned some successful things during Occupy. So here you go, back to the Charlie Kirk assassination as well, but all these leftist groups is, what they learned from Occupy is, and if you're familiar with Occupy, to be leaderless, to be loosely organized, because any centralization of leadership is going to attract law enforcement intelligence attention, but also will be used to break up these groups by taking out the leadership. And that's exactly what they did with Occupy. One guy decided to step up and be the spokesman for an Occupy movement, and they said, hey, it's winter. We can't have people camping out in winter. They're going to get sick. We've had incidents of rapes and stuff in these camps. Why don't you close it down for the winter and you could just reopen in the spring? Well, they never did reopen because once it's out, it's out. And they're never going to let you reconvene. So come back in the spring never happened, and that was the end of the Occupy movement. So that's the problem. So the left learned a lot from that. So they're never going to have a centralized leadership. They have discrete communications, loosely linked with secret NGOs and dark money backers who are able to provide them with all the logistical support that they may need. It's like during the BLM, you had these organizers, well-trained organizers, drive up in their brand new BMWs, get out with their most expensive bullhorns, rally the crowd, and then drive away. And then the crowd would lay all over the freeway and do the action. Witnessed it firsthand. I got pictures. And Zero Hedge, California bans most law enforcement, including federal agents, from wearing masks. But if you look closely, it makes exceptions for medical masks, including N95 respirators and tactical gear. State police are exempted from the law entirely. That's why it says most law enforcement. Why are state police exempted from the law? Because the state police are under the direction of Gavin Newsom. So the people that aren't under the direction of Gavin Newsom, they can't have masks. But Gavin Newsom's police, they can have masks. Fucking hypocrite. But we know that about him. He's a little scaly motherfucker. Zero Hedge, China on the cusp of commercializing U.S. pioneered Holy Grail fusion energy. And that's it for us today. So the fusion energy thing, you have to understand it is the Holy Grail of energy, because it's a nuclear reaction that doesn't produce any waste. So that might be technology that exists, that they're just suppressing it. I imagine on the advent of AI that all of a sudden it's going to just appear. We reinvented it. The issue is producing more energy than you use to create the reaction. That was a problem with fusion. They could do it. They learned to contain the reaction, but it costs too much energy to do that. So unless you have a net positive production of energy, you're not going to be able to use the technology. It doesn't make any sense to use it. But fusion is the holy grail. So I'm not a fan of fissile nuclear reactions because they produce too much waste and they're very dangerous. Fusion reactions are dangerous too, but I'm not going to get in a big diatribe. So there we go. Just update. Still a sporadic episode schedule. So probably nothing till Friday. No. Yeah. Nothing till Friday. It's hard to say. You know, you just have to stay tuned. Nothing tomorrow, Wednesday, maybe Thursday. I don't know. Still have tons of shit to do, but by October, we should be back to a regular schedule. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to like the episode and engage the channel. Subscribe, leave a comment. Follow the podcast on social media. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you all. Respect.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
The New World Order.
I'm an American. I have rights.